Salam, my friends, and welcome back to the Durgama Peninsula. That's right, Durgama Takeover Week 1 continues. I'm hoping to get even more of these battle reports out before the end of Week 1 of the campaign, and tonight we're playing Highly Classified. On screen now is, frankly, a very experimental Highly Classified list that I've wanted to play for a little while. It's actually built more for countermeasures where some of the things that it does are more relevant. But it can be played in Highly Classified, so I did that this evening. Firstly, you will note that the list can do, I think, every single classified. That's more necessary in Highly Classified than in countermeasures. In countermeasures, you can afford to focus on doing classifieds well and take advantage of the mulligan rules to, for example, not necessarily do every single type of classified that you might need to. So you can afford to, say, not have an engineer or not have a doctor in countermeasures. You'd want one or the other, but you don't necessarily need both because you can afford to mulligan or not do some classifieds every turn. In Highly Classified, you have no such luxury. If you cannot do every classified that lands on the table and your opponent can, you're at a significant disadvantage. And especially if you can't do one of the two that you draw as your secret classified and you don't get to secure the HVT, that's also really significant. So what's this list doing? Well, to start with, it can do every classified. We've got Fiddler as an engineer, Asawira doctor. We've got two models with visors between Nauf and the Mukhtar. We have the Mukhtar hacker, who is a classified doing machine. We've got two Barids to project network threat, Saladin, and then a whole lot of bikers. Some things to note that this list is missing. It's only got, obviously, firstly, it does not have redundancy. It has one heavy infantry, one doctor, one engineer. It does have multiple hackers, and it does have multiple dechargers, and it has many characters, veterans, and elites. But if I have to do doctors or I have to do engineer classifieds and I lose Fiddler or the Asawira, that's a problem. Fortunately, they're pretty resilient. Secondly, this list does not have a guided missile bot. So far, managing to successfully continue my approximately a month without writing any new lists with guided missiles. And thirdly, and probably most unusually, this list does not have a Hassassin Fidei or Al-Jabel. Those are, frankly, they are good pieces. The Hassassin Fidei is a good piece in literally any list. And it's totally serviceable in Highly Classified as well. But I wanted to try some things with this list and something had to be cut to afford that. In addition, in the Durgama Takeover version of Highly Classified in particular, there are 16-inch deployment zones, which means that the Fidei is more likely to roll, which means that she's exposed to more risk, sort of, etc. What this list is doing, the particular meme the list is trying to pursue, and which I think makes it probably a very good countermeasures list, although not necessarily quite so good Highly Classified, is that it is very, very hard to do classified objectives on. Huge numbers of models in this list are either no wound incapacitation, dogged, or explode, or have regeneration, which means that the list does not leave corpses around. So if Predator or Extremist Recovery or Extreme Prejudice or even just telemetry, which is easier to do on an unconscious trooper or data scan, etc. All of those classifieds are harder to do on this list because its troops tend to stay conscious all the way until they're dead. That would not matter at all one bit in this mission because of the classifieds that we drew, but I think it's an interesting idea and I'll continue to pursue it. Now, at time of recording, it's a Friday evening. I was hoping for a chill, relaxed, easygoing warm-up game before a small event that we have tomorrow. So in my infinite wisdom, I decided to play against excellent local player Ed, who is trying out Starmada. This is his list on screen now, and it makes only a small number of concessions to be able to be a Highly Classified list. It's only got the one hacker, but it has many just accidentally forward observers all over the place. The Crusher, turns out, I didn't realize this, Crushers are forward observers, just randomly. That Crusher would do a ton of work. It's got Varangians, it's got an Evo hacker, it's got the Total Reaction Bot. Those are great pieces, especially in Highly Classified, because they are hard to ignore. And so if a test run comes up, then you're very likely to be able to do it particularly easily. And that is made especially easy in this list because of Parvati. Again, the only thing, actually shockingly, that Parvati is missing is dechargers, but she's otherwise a doctor, engineer, and then character. So she can do a great deal of work. She will be harassed with a bronze and then one of the other pieces in the that can make a security link. She's actually going to be harassed with a Kappa hacker in this version of in this game, but she can link with a number of things. And then there is 6 troops worth of core security link, all of which give core link bonuses, which will ultimately fuel a paramedic, and then 2 multi-snipers, which will be BS 15, which is great. That's basically good. They are only line infantry, but they are not too expensive. Very solid, very serviceable. And then 2 Raven Eyes means you have a lieutenant and a decoy, and then 2 mines guarding that link. Now, they are EM mines, not shock or AP, which means they're not necessarily lethal to something like a Haqqislam Fidei, which I wouldn't have anyway, but 2 EM mines in the deployment zone still present a particularly nice defensive mix. To note, the Evo is doing double duty by being able to buff both the Peeler and the Combat Jump Crusher. Ed, in particular, went for a Crusher over a Knight of Santiago here, even though the Knight of Santiago Killer Hacker is a fantastic piece, because it's a little bit more consistent. Parachutist gives you an option, whereas the Santiago Knight only has combat jump, but I would spend a huge amount of my deployment and first turn being scared shitless of the Santiago Knight. It's particularly good against some of the things that my list is doing. The Crusher would not do badly at all, but Santiago Knight I was scared of. The points cost is close enough. A Santiago Knight, I'm sure, is more expensive, but a Crusher is a surprisingly good discount option who is as tough, almost, and maybe more tough thanks to mimetism, and can do almost the same number of classifieds. So it was a fantastic choice and would absolutely pay dividends. So this is what the table looked like. How we are playing this table is with accessible top stories that can be accessed by using the doors, which will take you immediately to the top story of the building. This is an alternate configuration for this table. It means that 100% of the 4x4 area is occupiable by troops, which makes that sort of quite interesting and different. And those can kind of become strong points, but they are quite easy to assault. We just use a short movement skill. Move takes you from the door to the position directly above the door inside the building, meaning that it's very possible to launch assaults into those buildings, even if models are like away from the windows and hunkered down. Real quickly, here are the classifieds. So our public classifieds are Sabotage, HVT Kidnapping, which needs a veteran or elite troop to civ-evac the HVT, Mapping, which needs a hacker or forward observer to get into the enemy deployment zone and touch a terrain piece, and HVT Designation, which means forward observing a HVT. My list was basically very good at all of these. I had 3 hackers, 2 of which could do forward observation, 2 dechargers, and many veteran and elite troops. I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't have some classifieds that would be easy for me to do but hard for Ed to do. He could also do all of these, but I'm not going to complain. This was totally serviceable. My unique classified was Net Undermine, which in Durgama Takeover version of Highly Classified is particularly easy. A Mukhtar can do Net Undermine on the first order of the game because the deployment zones are longer, which means that it forward deploys further forward. So part of the reason why I didn't, for example, have Algebel is that in Durgama Takeover, this is just trivially easy to do with anything like a forward deploying veteran. So Ed won the roll with a Whip 13 Lieutenant against my Whip 16 Saladin, and he snap-picked first turn because he did not want to deal with Haqqislam Fideis or blah, 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 blah. I've picked the side that I'm on, and I think it's mostly fine, but the 4 bikers and 1 probot at remote have forced my hand here. I basically had to decide deployment zone based on where I had a chance to put those models down, and that was pretty much my only consideration. This is kind of a thing that happens when you have lots of Silhouette 4 models in a list, and although I'm glad that I own 4 bikes and I do love playing them, I'm kind of willing to concede that this list just has too much cum. It's full of cum. There's way too much cum in this list. I need to cut back on the amount of cum that is basically hanging around. So, nevertheless, this is how I've deployed. So actually, we'll do Ed's deployment first. His reserve drop was his Total Reaction HMG, which is back here. The core link has taken up positions in this building, and there are mines watching the rear approaches because he's concerned about Haqqislam Fideis. The blue coat is unlinked and the rest of the pieces are linked. And importantly, he's got the Raven Eye officers split up so that I can't shotgun both of them because they are the obvious LT targets. They're kind of hanging out here and here. The snipers have got quite good coverage, long lanes down there, but the lane down here is kind of stopped by this ambulance. They still have quite a lot of coverage and they're stacked quite close together. The Haris with a Kappa Hacker, Blue Coat, and Parvati, aka the absolute set of classified doing machines, is hanging out in this building, but there's a door down here that they can exit. And then there are just some Varangians, spattered about. This is the part of the game where I begin to have panic attacks about the Santiago, because very obviously, even after the peeler comes down, he's only deployed 14 troops, and I begin to worry. For my deployment, as noted, it's mostly about places the bikes can deploy. So Zolekia is over here with one Kum Rider, there's another one back here, and then the fourth is hanging out back here. Nauf is not really visible, but is hanging out just sort of there, watching this long lane. I don't often put Nauf on ARO duties, but because he dies, right? He's single wound. If you don't link him, which you can't in vanilla, obviously, you're not playing Starco, he will go down to the first big gun that looks at him. But in this case, I wanted to ping back a Varangian, and to move any of the big weapons in Ed's list to engage him would have required lots of movement in this direction, which I would have been happy with. My HVT deployment is also predicated on making life as difficult as possible for Ed. She's here, as far away, especially from this team and even the core link, as possible. So HVT in this scenario, in Durgama Takeover, highly classified, has to be quite far forward, but I'm quite happy with that deployment. The Mukhtar duo is hanging out in this building. That's the Asawira Doctor. I've deployed the Asawira Doctor's friend bot back here. I was kind of expecting to put Nauf down there as a reserve, but I ended up not doing so. It was more important to come back here. And then I put repeater coverage out as best I can. There's a flash pulse bot there, there's a pro bot there, and then of course Saladin himself is there. And I'm trying to spread that repeater network out so that if there's a Santiago killer hacker, for example, about to drop, then it's going to have a hard time moving into engage without taking multiple hacking arrows through a repeater network. My Libertos is deployed behind this building here and here, watching this doorway, and then Fiddler is hanging out with Saladin because I am desperate for Saladin to not die. So I want to make it as absolutely challenging as possible for Saladin to be gone on. We have Jackbots watching doors. Saladin himself is a repeater. I'm just not willing to truck anything, and even my little turret back here is deployed to make an attack on Saladin as difficult as possible. There are a couple of breeds hanging around, but they will not play a huge amount of a part in this game. So Ed is first player, and his first turn, almost but not quite, can be summarized as the old meme. Libertos wins game by itself, both players declared losers. Now, he does actually kill the Libertos, but is one of those comedy of errors. The peeler has a crack at it. It does actually discover the mine and destroy the mine, but multiple shots, including 4 past saves at one point, where the Libertos rolls a 17 to dodge, takes 4 hits and survives without going into dogged. This happens, like, it survives shot after shot from the peeler, pulls back into cover. The bronze goes after it by climbing out of the window using climbing plus, gets a line of fire on it. It survives that face-to-face roll, drops prone. After like all of this Benny Hill bullshit, he eventually manages to bring it down with the bronze sort of coming out the window in this direction, but he has very few orders left. I think the Libertos saps something like 6 or 7 orders, plus there are other like support elements going on, which means that basically the rest of Ed's turn is spent with Parvati jumping out this window. In fact, no, it's Parvati that kills the Libertos in the end. She turns out to be the most lethal piece on the field. The bronze would have to climb all the way down, but with a jump she can get out. She takes a face-to-face roll at like 10 inches, so outside shotgun template range, outside shotgun good range. I actually like to take... No, I think I keep dodging. I want to just waste Ed's time, but I roll something like a 4, and she gets a crit, which she will do because she's rolling 5 dice with the submachine guns in that Haris, and she takes it down. She then jumps up onto this ledge, where she will spend the rest of the game. She'll drop prone there in the end, but basically she takes a face-to-face roll where it takes about 3 goes. She gets spotlit, and there's some flash-to-flash flash, pulse versus submachine gun action, but she eventually takes down the Furnace. Now, what is super relevant here is that Ed has accomplished no classifieds. That's really good, and he's only killed 2 pieces, and both of them were in combat group 2. So I'm about to begin my first turn with 12 orders in the first combat group. Why is it 12? Well, because Saladin is in this combat group, and in the Durgama Takeover version of Highly Classified, one of the bonuses that you get is that your lieutenant gets +1 order. I suspect there is a reason why Haqqislam High Command has deployed us to this location. So none of my stuff is impetuous, and although I want to stop and deal with Parvati, focus on the mission. First things first, I can quite comfortably accomplish a large number of objectives. So the Mukhtar Harris will take point here. And just as a bit of a spoiler alert, when I mentioned that Mukhtar hacker is a classified accomplishing machine, I mean it. Every single classified, spoiler alert, is going to be done by that Mukhtar. So they move forward up through this space, and in about 4 orders, they accomplish Spotlight the HVT, Net Undermine my classified, and then I blow up those planters that are just beyond this panoply here. This table has been set up for an event that we have tomorrow. Please ignore the objectives across the center. It's purely decorative. So we blow up these planters with a decharge. That gets us sabotage. We've crossed the halfway line in like 1-2 orders. That gets us Net Undermine. That's my special classified. And then it takes us 2 goes to Spotlight the HVT. Fantastic. I have done just about every classified I can do easily. I've accomplished 3. It's time to try to do some work. So a couple of things will happen out of the second combat group. Actually, so one thing will happen in the second combat group, and that is that this biker here will move, drop some smoke to get past the peeler, and then zoom around here, pop up into this building, has to dismount to get into the doorway, and then it will just shotgun, and it will die. The bronze turns out has a 360 visor. That's fun. And so the bronze can shoot me in the back, despite the fact that he's looking out the window. But I will put my shotgun down, and I will wound the bronze, and I will kill the Kappa hacker. So that's a hacker down. There are still forward observers in that core link, but fantastic. I've robbed the link bonuses from the link as well. And then the rest of my turn is basically Zalekia getting off of her bike, coming up into this space here, and avenging the flash pulse remote by killing Parvati. This takes quite a few orders. I sort of have to crawl around. It's breaker pistol fights, etc. Parvati has cleared because of all of the things I've been doing with the other biker. Parvati has cleared targeted by this stage. But it feels worth doing. Even though I actually thought Parvati had decharges, she doesn't, so she can't do sabotage. She is such a classified doer that if Ed has classifieds in hand that she can do, it's well worth killing her. And as it will happen, Ed actually has experimental drug. And so with Parvati dead, the only doctor that he has is his paramedic, who will fail to do the classified late in the game. I don't accomplish a great deal else, but this feels like a pretty good turn. I've killed 2 things. This is not a ton, but it's fine. And more importantly, I have done 3 classifieds. I try and fail to punt a pitcher down there with the Hassassin Bareed, which would pin back the bronze. They're BS12, which is very good, but sometimes they fail. There is a little bit of additional gunfighting. The Mukhtar has a go at the bronze and takes a wound for his trouble, and I'm just not willing to have that fight any further. I think something also happens with the other Mukhtar. I probably do some active hacking trying to carbonite the peeler total reaction bot, and I think I succeed. I think I carbonite the peeler and then kill it with a shotgun, but the Mukhtar gets wounded in the process doing that. So both Mukhtars end up wounded, but I do bring down that peeler as well. So broadly, this is quite a good turn. I've taken out some pieces, I've taken some orders away. Ed has a fair amount of bottle to go into his turn. The main thing that I am worried about is that my defensive formation is fraying, and in particular, these bikers have had to move. They have moved forward, they have stopped protecting these angles, and they've moved up to engage the link team, which means that it's probably drop troop time. So this is a shot change now to the beginning of the second round. You can see the bikes look like they're still there, but Zalekia herself has dismounted to this position here to take down Parvati, and it is indeed drop troop time. I have been worried about a Santiago Knight, but what actually turns up in this wonderful undefended spot right here is a Crusher forward observer with decharges, boarding shotgun, and Panzerfaust. And so it very, very trivially walks up to this planter bed, blows it up with some decharges, walks around to here, maps the same planter bed, takes it one roll, and that's 2 classifieds done, which are also classifieds that will be challenging for me to do. Mapping is going to be hard for me to do while that link team is still there. The Crusher then moves up around this way. It has one go taking a face-to-face roll with this biker here. It lays templates down on me. I dodge, it shoots me, I have mimetism and cover. He hits me once, I pass my save. And he just pulls the Crusher back here and says, I am your problem now. He hasn't got enough orders to prosecute an attack on Saladin, and in any case, he has to move through a bit of Overwatch to do so. But he can sit there and just be like, if you do not kill this Crusher, then this Crusher will come for you. And I am very worried about Saladin dying, and also that Crusher can still do a number of the classifieds that are on the table. Yes, it is a very long way away from my HVT, but it could feasibly get there, and it can forward observe the HVT, and it can evacuate the HVT, so it could potentially do every classified on the table, apart from Ed's private one. So I'm like, yep, you're right, I have to deal with that, and you have made it my problem. So we flip to my turn, and this is one of those weird turns that highly classified manifests, and countermeasures does as well, but in countermeasures it feels more measured and intentional. You have the turn where you can't do any classifieds, so you just kill things. Now in countermeasures, that is what you do when you have a really bad flop, when you have like one thing that you can do. But even in countermeasures, it's very rare, I find, for a good countermeasures list, not to be able to do like at least one classified objective every turn, and then you usually have a couple of turns where you can do almost everything on the table. In this case, I couldn't do any classifieds because the HVT evacuation was something I could only do at the end of the game, and mapping was not going to happen until Ed had moved that link team out of the position that it was in, and I had done every single thing else, so I literally had my entire turn just to try and kill things with. And it would be a fairly violent turn in that respect. So this biker, who starts the game in Combat Group 1, actually gets flipped to Combat Group 2, and it drives around here, and it takes a bunch of fights with the Crusher, and the Crusher goes unconscious and it dies. So I take Zalekia and I crawl her back here out of sniper line of fire, run down here, get back on her bike. She actually drives around to there, has a face-to-face roll with the Crusher. She spangs a template, good for her, and she kills her. So 2 bikes, 1 dead. To kill the Crusher, it's only armor 2. This feels about reasonable. Down it goes. The bulk of the rest of this turn is spent trying to figure out how I will deal with that core link. And I'm actually going to rewind very slightly and just talk about the decision I made at the beginning of this turn. So Saladin is generating 3 regular orders, obviously because of the Strategos plus extra order in this version of the scenario. And I had the option of flipping him into the first group, taking this biker back here, driving up, evacuating the civilian back to there. And with those orders, I kind of guessed I could pull it back maybe into this building. Maybe, but unlikely. I wanted to get it back to this nook here, but I judged that I would not be able to without a lot of investment. Now, it's possible I could have locked Ed out of the game if I had done that, but it was just a bridge. It was just a bridge too far. Like, I sat there looking at taking as much time as I felt was sportsmanlike, which was not that much time, trying to figure out if it was the right play, and I eventually settled against it, only because there were many pieces with quite a few orders, especially the Crusher, that could do all of the things to this HVT. And any movement that I would move this HVT, even if it was back here, didn't actually really massively increase the distance between it and the pieces that Ed could civ-evac or forward observe it with. So basically the alternate use of the orders in that second combat group was to leave everything as it was, but transfer that biker that died over and have a run at the Crusher. Killing the Crusher I ultimately figured was the better play, but it was quite close. So what that means is that I have 11 orders in the first combat group to try and do some damage. Now he actually holds this quite well, and it is a very, very good example of how to triage the kind of attack that I'm going to make. So Fiddler had originally deployed in this building. Now that I have seen all 15 troops, and especially that the Crusher is dead, Fiddler can decamp. She actually comes out these windows here, down and around there, and again, in this version of the scenario, models with terrain total or climbing plus, which she and her jackpots have, get +1 movement to their first movement value. So they are zippy as hell. They get all the way up and around here. I have one irregular order left in the second group, which I use to just see if it works, and I lob a smoke grenade with a smoke grenade launcher down to there, so that they can get out of the building, and they set up here behind this ambulance. I have like one spare short skill, so I'm throwing some drop bears during this period. I get a drop bear on top of the ambulance, and then a drop bear back here, and then the jackpot attack commences. And this is a very good example of how to triage this kind of attack, and in particular, how to avoid the trap of this attack. So the jackpots, at this point, Ed's moved his link forward, and there is a sniper there, and there is a sniper where you see this one here, and the War Corps has moved forward to there. And other troops are kind of like lined up behind various barricades. I can get, with 7 inches of movement with the jackpots, I can get templates basically covering there and there. So I can hit the War Corps and both snipers, but I cannot hit anything else. I don't have quite enough movement. And that is important. Ed could have chosen to dodge with those snipers, since obviously the jackpots have templates, but he did not. And it was absolutely correct to not dodge. And this is established wisdom, right? People who have played Infinity for any length of time get into the habit of always be shooting. If you're not sure if there's a genuine question, should I be dodging or should I be shooting in ARO, there's a very good chance you should be taking the lethal option. And it would have been a horrific mistake to try and dodge templates in this case. A mistake that Ed would never in a million years have made. You have to take your licks here. Yes, okay, you are going to have Vulcan shotguns absolutely covering the active turn weapons in your link, but that is all they will get. You have to take the shots now while you still have 2 dice on 12s with each of those cappers, because if you dodge or you let a jackpot get through, then in the next order, it's going to get into the meat and it's going to keep killing. And then it's going to be really, really bad. Take your licks. And yes, I got both snipers, one unconscious, one dead, and the War Corps at the cost of 2 jackpots and a lot of orders. The orders it took me to launch that attack compared to what I killed and what I traded, actually not unreasonable. Ed is well down on guns now. All he's really got is the Red Fury Bronze. But that is how you kind of have to hold that situation. I do a bit more faffing around. There's some hacking, blah, blah, blah. I can't get to the bronze in the building. Hacking area is just not quite far enough. I move the Asawira up into the building and do some like doctoring. And basically what I do is the Asawira ends up at this window here, watching this space. And then Fiddler ends up down there, watching this space. And I just set up to try and stop the subsequent run on my HVT. So this is how things look at the beginning of the third round. You can see Zalekia has pulled back and the Asawira and Fiddler are knocked in there. And that's the most relevant stuff. The mess that has been made by the jackpots is over here. And then there's mines there and mines there. The first thing Ed does is that he tries to paramedic back the Kappa Sniper. If that had succeeded, it would have done experimental drug. Unfortunately, it did not. Rolled 2 shots, missed one of them, didn't roll the 10 to medic the sniper back up. Oh well, that was his only chance, basically. He could have baited out some attempts to score wounds, but it really wasn't worthwhile in this particular case, because he has to go absolutely hell for leather to my HVT. The Varangian guard back here is going to be impetuousing forward, and what his job will be is it takes him like 4 orders, because there's some long-range smoke throws, but basically he blankets this area with smoke because the link team has to get through. Fiddler is doing dodges, like every attempt he makes to just sort of get past and make regular face-to-face rolls is not working. The Varangian lays the smoke and out the link comes. It makes it all the way through. Fiddler does some dodges in this direction, but she's not going to be able to clear the smoke. The link cracks up into the building, and then the Raven Eye Lieutenant, who has, remember, 2 Lieutenant orders, runs up to this window, completely spangs a shot from Nauf, and succeeds with the last Lieutenant order, 2 successful forward observer rolls on the HVT. So that has put Ed on 3 classifieds done. His Crusher accomplished mapping and sabotage, and his lieutenant accomplished HVT designation. At this point in the game, I am actually winning, just barely. I have done my unique classify, which is worth an extra point, and no one is securing the HVT, but it's relatively straightforward with the formation break that Ed has had for me to wrap the game up 10-0. This is the shot of how the game looks at the end of the beginning of my final round. And I faff around for a little bit, like the Asawira Impetuous is forward because it's shot a Varangian. It runs this way and it fights the bronze, but it's all a bit pointless. Zalekia moves up to here and uses her smoke grenade launcher to get some smoke down there. And then the Mukta hacker pops out of the building, synchronizes the HVT, and then just crawls through this space and maps the dumpster. And that puts me on every classified complete, including my special one. So I have done all of the available classifieds. I have more orders left at this point, but they're pointless to spend. The game is as done as it can be. There's nothing on the line for scoring kills. So that ends, I want to say 10-3. 10-3 Haqqislam's way. So that is another Durgama Takeover game complete. I hope to have some more up possibly on Sunday. We'll see. There is a small event happening locally on Saturday. I don't always get to play in those. I'll see if I do. It would be nice. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. As before, I will leave a link to the Durgama campaign battle report in the pinned comments. I hope you'll go and visit it. Give it a like, as it were, rate it, commendation, etc. Those all really help the campaign. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.